Thank you, Asha. Yesterday during my talk, I already started to allude to this new concept, this new era of treating IBD as a progressive disease. And actually, we have introduced in the last years a new vocabulary. And part of this vocabulary is tight control and treat to target. And I will talk about that this morning. So what is a treat to target concept? The treat to target is a concept that has been already adopted in many chronic diseases, such as hypertension, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis. Basically, if you visit your cardiologist and you have hypertension, your cardiologist will tell you, I will give you this pill, and my goal is to get this target, this blood pressure level, and this level for your LDL cholesterol. Same is true for rheumatoid arthritis and diabetes. And in all those diseases, this treat-to-target strategy has been associated with better long-term outcome. For instance, in diabetes, targeting these levels of hemoglobin A1C has been associated with reduced mortality. So this concept has been fully adopted by many other specialties. So we try to basically translate the concept of treat to target to IBD. So a treat to target approach is one in which the goal is to reach a predefined target outcome that you will discuss with your patient. This is your target. This is our target. And the treatment is adjusted using a tight control strategy. Sorry. So these two concepts are highly complementary. So what should be the target? Should the target be symptoms? Should the target be biomarkers such as CRP, calprotectin? Should the target be endoscopy? Or even further, histology in ulcerative colitis or cross-sectional imaging in Crohn's disease? I must say upfront that this is an evolving debate, but I will tell you what is currently done and what may be the future. So, both in Crohn's disease and UC, there is now this common acceptation that endoscopic healing should be the new target. We have a lot of data, and I will just show some slides, showing that being able to achieve endoscopic healing in Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis is associated with better outcome. And of course, this concept has been introduced because we have now drugs that are able to get this kind of healing that you have in the screen. So for instance, in Crohn's disease, I'm sure you have already seen this slide, we have evidence that when you are able to reach the target of endoscopic healing, this is associated with long-term, good long-term clinical outcome. This is a sub-study coming from the Step-Up Top-Down study that you heard about yesterday. Approximately 50 patients from this trial. At the end of the trial, they got a colonoscopy at year 2. And then they were followed up during year 3 and year 4. At the end of year 2, the patients in purple were in full endoscopic remission, as defined by an endoscopic index of severity, the SCSCD, of 0, while some patients in orange still had some persistent endoscopic lesions. And as you can see, during year 3 and 4, those who were able to get full endoscopic healing are less need of steroids and infliximab, and develop much less active perianal disease. This is another post-hoc analysis from the EXTEND study, where we looked at patients who achieve what we have defined as deep remission, which is also an evolving concept. In this EXTEND study, deep remission was defined as clinical and endoscopic remission. When we looked at patients who were in deep remission at week 12 and their hospitalization rates during the following year, all patients who were in deep remission, as you can see, were never hospitalized, as compared to 17% or 9%, it depends if you are considering all-cause hospitalizations or Crohn's disease-related hospitalizations, in patients who had no deep remission, meaning that those patients still had endoscopic lesions evolving. So we have also the same kind of data. There are even more data in UC suggesting that endoscopic healing, as illustrated here, is a driver for success. Just one example, which is from, again, a post-hoc analysis from the ACT trial. What we did was to look at the endoscopy at week 8 in patients who receive infliximab. So all those patients were treated with infliximab in this graph, and we just look at their endoscopic score at week 8, defined as a Mayo score. Those who were able to achieve endoscopic remission, as defined by endoscopic Mayo score of 0 or 1, which are at the top, where their risk of colectomy was very low as compared to patients who had an endoscopic score of 2 or 3. And there are many examples in the literature, even in population-based studies, showing that if you are able to achieve endoscopic healing in UC, this is associated with much better outcomes as far as hospitalization, risk of colectomy, and also long-term risks such as cancer. So we try with IOIBD, the International Organization for IBD, to propose some guidelines. And this is an expert advice, so it's not evidence-based. And this is a target that we have proposed in UC. The target for ulcerative colitis is a combination of clinical, of patient-reported outcome remission, defined as resolution of rectal bleeding and diarrhea, and endoscopic remission, defined as resolution of friability and ulceration. Using the Mayo score, this should be 0 or 1. When we did this consensus, it was in 2015, we considered that CRP, fecal calpro, and histology are not useful as a target. And cross-sectional imaging was certainly not a target in UC. But once again, as I will allude in the last part of my talk, this target may evolve in the next years. As far as Crohn's disease is concerned, the target was defined as, again, remission with no more abdominal pain and diarrhea that should be assessed at a minimum of 3 months during active disease, and endoscopic remission, which was defined as resolution of ulcerations at ileoconoscopy, or if there was no lesion at colonoscopy, for instance, with a patient with pure small bowel disease, resolution of findings of inflammation on cross-sectional imaging. So this should be assessed at 6 months interval during the active phase. We also mentioned that CRP and fecal calpro are not a target so far based on the available data, and that histology in Crohn's disease 2015 was not a target either. So the second concept, which is actually linked to treat to target, is a concept of tight control. So meaning that you need to keep the patients under control if you want to prevent disease progression. And here again, we have the same question. How to achieve control? Should we follow symptoms? Should we follow something else? So if we follow symptoms, we know that it's not enough. And there are a lot of data showing that there is a very poor correlation between symptoms and objective markers of inflammation. This is a sub-analysis of the SONIC trial, where we followed 188 patients with assessment of endoscopic activity at baseline and week 26. And just concentrate on the first line of this table. When you look at patients who are in clinical remission, 57% had complete mucosal healing. But if you look at patients who had moderately severely active Crohn's disease, almost 30% had complete mucosal healing. So there is a discrepancy between symptoms and endoscopy, and I'm pretty sure you are aware of that. So this is not a good way to to do tight control. Following symptoms is not enough. So the next way to follow is to base your follow-up on objective data. And these objective data, nowadays, are basically a mix of biomarkers and endoscopy. A lot of studies have been done in the recent years with biomarkers, and essentially two biomarkers, CRP and fecal calprotectin. This is an example from Leuven, showing just something. We know these are two different patients who are on infliximab, and as you can see just by following the CRP, you can see that one patient is complete loss of response and CRP is all over the place, while the green patient is under tight control with a very nice maintenance of CRP at a low level. Fecal calprotectin has been the topic of many, many studies. This is one of them, showing that both in Crohn's disease on the left-hand side and in ulcerative colitis on the right-hand side, fecal calpro is a good surrogate marker for endoscopic lesions. As you can see from those ROC curves, the PPV and the NPV were quite acceptable. So I think in clinical practice, we can use fecal calpro as a surrogate marker of endoscopic activity. This is an interesting prospective study, 4 months prospective study of 30 patients with Crohn's disease with clinical remission on adalimumab for more than 6 months. So the fecal calpro at inclusion were significantly higher in patients who relapsed during the follow-up as compared with those who maintain remission, like 800 versus 100. And they were able to define an optimal cutoff for fecal calpro to predict remission during the next 4 months, which was in that study 204. I mean, this value is not the golden value, it's just to give you an example. And on the right-hand side, you have the figure illustrating nicely the difference between mean fecal calpro in patients with remission and relapse. So to conclude, a fecal calpro was able to predict relapse with high accuracy. I'm pretty sure that Miguel Reguero will also show you some data showing that fecal calpro is a useful tool as well to predict recurrence in patients with an history of surgery. So what is amazing and what is used a lot in Europe, especially in Scandinavia, is monitoring of calpro at home. And we have some kits. This is just an example of the kit. I've personally did it. It's very, very easy. You have a small kit where you can basically take your stool, and with this small device, you can put your stool in front of your phone, and then the phone will immediately measure what is the level of fecal calpro in your stools. And this level is immediately transmitted to the IBD center. And this is what the IBD center gets. So they are able to monitor the patient at distance, and they will have different patients with different levels. And for instance, if you are this is a follow-up, prospective follow-up of one patient, you have the calpro pre-treatment, which was high, and then it went to uncertain, and then the patient was in full control after 9 months, and then he had a flare. Then the treatment was changed, and he was again in the target range. So you can really do, using this tool, a very precise and tight control of disease activity. And this is very friendly, and the patients, at least in Europe, love it. It has not yet been fully introduced in the US. We heard a lot about TDM, therapeutic drug monitoring, yesterday, and we had a great talk by Adam Sheffetz, and it's very clear that therapeutic drug monitoring is part of tight control. Drug monitoring should be used to optimize primary response, loss of response, maintenance, when you are thinking about de-escalation and when you are thinking about retreatment after a long drug holiday. This is just an example why proactive drug monitoring makes sense. This is data from ACCENT-1. And you have patients with different quartile of levels of infliximab at week 14, so after induction. And as you can see, if you have good levels at week 14, the quartile on the right, this is associated with tight control, meaning very low levels of CRP. So monitoring, proactive monitoring of drug levels is also part of tight control. This is a very nice study from Adam as well, and I think he has more data that he will present at DDW, showing that proactive therapeutic drug monitoring is useful to optimize infliximab maintenance treatment. This was the first part of his study, which was retrospective cohort of patients in clinical remission, and there were two different physicians. One was not using dose optimization, and the other one was using drug levels. On the left-hand side, you have the probability of remaining on infliximab. And those who were followed with drug level in blue did much better than those who were not followed. And when Adam looked at the infliximab trough, those who were able to reach an infliximab level more than 5 at the top did even better than those who were less than 5. So you can really fine-tune your infliximab maintenance treatments. So this is a kind of proposed timing of monitoring in Crohn's disease, which is already adopted in clinical practice. When you have active disease based on objective criteria, you follow your patients, and after 6 months, you evaluate your targets. So it should be no symptoms, no endoscopic activity, no biomarker, and you measure your drug levels. And if you are in a good target, it's fine, you can maintain. If you have not reached your target, you should think about optimization. There are still, just to finish, some very important questions pending. The first one is, as I told you, the target is evolving. For instance, what definition of endoscopic healing should we adopt? So far, it's just a mere definition of no ulceration. I believe we should use this more sophisticated tool, which is a SCSCD, which is very easy to do in clinical practice, but the cutoff to define what is endoscopic remission is not yet clear. Second, is histology the next target in UC? This is an interesting study from Oxford, basically showing that as far as the need for steroids or need for hospitalizations, those patients who are in endoscopic healing with no histological remission had higher needs of steroids and higher risk of hospitalizations as compared to patients in red who had full, deep endoscopic and histological healing. So maybe in the future we will target histological healing. We have to be careful because the control should not be too tight. There are examples, for instance, in diabetes, where they reduce too much the level of the targets, and actually this was associated, this very intensive tight control was associated with increased mortality. So we have to be careful in defining our targets. And finally, there are several prospective studies that will reinforce, I think, this concept. There is one study which is called REACT-2 study, and you already heard about this study during this meeting. It's a cluster randomization study where in some practices, patients are just treated based on symptom, and in other practices, they are treated on endoscopy, meaning that even if the patient is doing well, he has endoscopic lesion, he step up. There is another study, which is the CALM study, which is about treating to biomarkers. This study is fully enrolled, same concept. Naive patient treated with prednisone. One group is followed and step up based on symptoms, and the other group, tight control, is followed and step up based on symptoms, but also CRP and fecal calpro. We'll have the result of this study next year. And finally, we would like to combine all those concepts to show that this works in IBD. And this will need a prospective study, which is called a disease modification trial, which is a difficult study to do, but I think we should do it. Basically, we should enroll patients with high risk, using, for instance, a predict tool as defined by Corey, treat those patients early, and then compare a tight control arm with a classical step-up arm, and the endpoint should be at 1 year deep remission, and at 3 to 5 years, the damage and disability. Damage as defined by the Lehman Index, and the disability using the new disability index that we have just published. To conclude, treat to target and tie controls are parts of new disease management in IBD. They are part of a new strategy aiming once again at blocking disease progression towards damage and disability. This is actually already applied in clinical practice, but there is a need for future prospective validations of all those concepts. Thank you.